What's going on, you bunch of heathens? We're back with part 2 of the 1996 Mount Everest Disaster. I think last video got uploaded on Friday. I wanted to finish this off. Make sure you guys check out the original video. It's linked below. Without further ado, let's jump in.
On the 10th of May 1996, a blizzard descended on the death zone at the peak of Mount Everest, trapping dozens of climbers in the midst of a
I saw some comments on the last video, from the last video, and just gotta say, yeah, maybe climbing something that as an amateur or whatever that's, or sick like some of the other people did last time, climbing something that has something called a death zone probably isn't the smartest move to do, That's just my personal opinion, though.
At an altitude of over 8,000 meters or 26,200 feet, they were dependent on a limited supply of bottled oxygen. And now, in addition, they were exhausted, frozen, and lost in a storm that reduced visibility to zero, eliminated tracks and trails, and made it almost impossible to move. As night...
Oh yeah, they should also probably follow all the rules, like the one that says, hey, don't climb the mountain in, this kind of weather. Probably a smart thing to do.
Set in, it was very apparent that not everyone who had ascended to the roof of the world that day would survive their return down the mountain. There were two large tour groups making a push for the summit of Mount Everest that day, both departing from the final camp on the southeastern route. One group was from the New Zealand company Adventure Consultants, led by 35-year-old veteran climber Robert Hall, and consisting of 3 guides, 8 clients, and 7 Sherpas. The other large group was from the American company Mountain Madness.
Yes, and I believe that first leader, ended up dying on the mountain with the other climber, I believe.
By 40-year-old mountaineer Scott Fisher, and consisting of 3 guides, 8 clients.
Or was it Scott?
38-year-old Anatoly Bukriv was a guide employed by Mountain Madness. Born in the Soviet Union, he spoke relatively poor English, and also had a marked independent streak. He had been reprimanded several times before for not following orders or failing to communicate with the rest of his team.
Sounds like a great employee to have on this super dangerous hike.
He was an incredible climber and had much to offer in the way of expertise and experience.
I mean, but does he really if he's constantly going off on his own and not following what he's told? That's my issue with it.
On the day of the summit push, he reached the peak way ahead of the rest of his group, and then remained there for an hour and a half, helping his clients and others with the final part of their journey. He then turned around and began the climb down to camp, again significantly ahead of the rest of his group. Anatoly did all of this without supplemental oxygen, an incredible feat of endurance and athleticism, given that at the peak of Everest there is just 1/3 of the oxygen.
Homie was built different in that case. Like, holy shit.
At sea level. By the time he returned to camp at 5 p.m. on the 10th of May 1996, he was desperately in need of rest. He returned to his tent, hydrated himself, and slept for a few hours, allowing him to recover.
Yeah, I don't blame him.
From
I
the
do that
exhaustion
too.
Of the climb and the effects of altitude sickness. By the time he woke, the blizzard had descended on the mountain, trapping dozens of climbers on the slopes above. Realizing that they would need help, Anatoly went from tent to tent looking to assemble a rescue party, but found that every other climber present was either exhausted beyond any useful action or suffering extreme ill effects from cold or altitude. Even the reserve Sherpas who had remained at camp in case of an emergency that day.
I mean, I'll give it to the guy. He may be like a stubborn streak, disobeys orders, or instructions, I guess, not necessarily orders, and independent. But when it came down to it, was like, shit, they're going to need people to go, they're going to need a rescue squad. He sets out to help. Like, hats off to him.
Were unwell. They had suffered carbon monoxide poisoning after an accident with a stove, and were
Ooh.
so severely
Oh
ill
no.
that they were vomiting blood. They
Oh,
could not
gross.
help with the rescue effort. Anatoly realized that he was the most able person left at camp, and so at
Oh, that's a
7:30
scary
p.m.
feeling.
he set out on his own into the howling blizzard, hoping against hope that he might stumble across some survivors in the storm. It soon became apparent that this was very unlikely. The weather was against him, he could barely see, couldn't find guide ropes, and struggled to ascend despite now using supplemental oxygen. After an hour of trying, he returned to camp. Later, when
Well, yeah, you just at least he tried. I mean, homie earlier in the day made that same climb and stayed up there for a while helping others without oxygen, went back down to recuperate, and then still tried going back up. Like, at least homie tried. I'll give him that.
a half-frozen gaggle of survivors managed to find their way back to camp at around 11:30 p.m., they were able to advise
God, I love that
Anatoly
term,
of the
gaggle.
location of some of the trapped climbers. Armed with this information, freshly rested and with fresh oxygen, Anatoly set out again for a second rescue attempt.
Oh,
This
fuck
time,
yeah.
Despite facing conditions almost as harsh as he had before, he was successful. He spotted the dim light of a headlamp in the dark, forged his way toward it through the snow, and found a group of survivors. In this group were adventure consultants' clients, Beck Weathers and Yasuko Namba. 47-year-old businesswoman Yasuko Namba had made the summit on the afternoon of the push, but had thereafter struggled to get down. She was the oldest woman to reach the summit of Everest at that point in time, and was also
Damn, really?
smaller in stature than many of the other climbers, making her more prone to the effects of the
Yeah,
cold.
you can really tell
As she
that
descended
she's a
and
lot
the blizzard
smaller than
struck,
them.
she became stranded with several others on the south side of the mountain. Yasuko Namba had at least made the summit before being stranded. Beck Weathers, on the other hand, had not got that far. The 49-year-old pathologist from Texas had managed the ascent to the final camp high up on the slopes of Everest without major incident, but at this extremely high altitude, he had begun to suffer. He had, some years ago, had an eye operation that weakened his corneas, and as
Oh,
the
no.
group reached higher and higher altitudes, his vision grew more and more limited. By the day of the summit push, he could barely see at all.
Oh, that's not
wishing to
good.
quit when the goal of a month.
That's not good whatsoever. Add on to the fact that you're from Texas. If he, I don't know what level he was at for climbing though, but if you're not accustomed, like you said, he got there to like there fairly to the base camp at the before the final summit fairly well, but going from a super low elevation like Texas to a high elevation is really hard. So I know moving from the mountains of Wyoming to Texas in junior high, I found it a lot easier to breathe there than I did than I did when I lived in Wyoming. But after acclimating there and then heading back to Wyoming, it got so much harder.
This long trip was so tantalizingly close, Beck managed the first part of the summit push simply by sticking close to the person in front of him and stepping where they stepped. As the sun rose, however, his vision worsened still further, and he was forced to admit that he could barely see. Expedition leader Robert Hall considered sending him back down to camp with a Sherpa, but Beck asked to be allowed to wait and see if his sight improved once the sun was higher in the sky. Robert agreed, and instead of sending
And you're
Beck
paying
back
like
to camp,
50K, I
he
guess.
left him at a midway point on the slopes of Everest to be picked up when the group descended. Beck's
Alone?
eyesight did not improve, and he waited where he had been left for several hours. When the blizzard swept in, he became trapped in place,
Oh, that
unable to
sucks.
see twice over through his failing eyes and through the driving snow.
That's a
Robert Hall
pretty sure that's a
would
red-ass
die
nose.
without returning to collect Beck Weathers.
Yeah,
Instead,
so
Beck was found.
okay, so yes, I was Right. Robert was the one who died on the thing after what's-his-face couldn't get down the mountain. And they told him to leave him. At least, I'm pretty sure that's who it was, yeah. Or is it the other dude? I feel bad for mixing this up.
Found by
We'll
another
see.
adventure consultant's guide, Michael Groom, who took him some way down toward camp on a
A
short
dope
rope
picture.
before they too became stuck along with several other climbers. When the weather slackened at nearly midnight, some of this group made a break for camp. Left behind were Beck Weathers, Yasuko Namba, 38-year-old Mountain Madness client Charlotte Fox, 41-year-old Mountain Madness client Sandy Hill, and 33-year-old Mountain Madness client Tim Madsen. All of them suffering from cold,
Oh, no picture of
exhaustion, and
Tim.
altitude
Oh,
in
that's
one
not
way
good.
or another. Yasuko's condition was particularly acute. She struggled to follow instructions, repeatedly putting on her oxygen mask despite being out of oxygen. Soon, she was barely conscious.
Well, I'm sure at that point you're kind of delirious, and the only thing that you can think of that might help you would be that. So trying to put it on, hoping against hope that there's at least a little bit left to help you. And also, not even necessarily that at the same time. It could also just be you're delirious from lack of oxygen, and the one thing drilled into you is, hey, the oxygen will save your life if you get like this. And so her instinct is just to put it on or something.
Her hands outside of her mittens and frozen. It looked to the others as though she stood little chance of surviving. This was the state of affairs when Anatoly Bukriv finally stumbled upon the group. Anatoly realized that, given the conditions, he would have to walk each of the survivors back to camp one by one.
Oh, that's a hellish trip.
Promising that he would return for Beck, Yasuko, Sandy, and Tim. Before he could return, Beck, freezing cold, blind, and perhaps confused by hypoxia, stood up and announced, "Hey, I've got this all figured out."
Oh.
Then, without further
that's where that fucking quote comes from. Ooh.
explanation, he disappeared into the night. Those left hunkered on the ice could only presume they had just watched a man walk to his death. Agonizing
I would have
minutes
presumed
later,
so too.
Bukriv did return. By this time, it was clear that Yasuko was beyond saving, and Beck was lost to the night. Anatoly walked Sandy back to camp with Tim following in his footsteps as best he could. The three reached camp. Alive.
Oh shit, Tim made it?
Only barely.
Oh, but Yasuko got left.
Beck survived off the trail and unguided in the heart of the blizzard.
Ain't no way.
He made his way back to camp alone, arriving the next day. By the time he stumbled into camp, he looked beyond saving. His extremities
that looks
and
horrible.
much of his face were black from frostbite.
No wonder his
hands
face
were
looked
so
like
badly
his nose looked
affected
like so red like
the
that.
surgeon would later call them the hands of a dead man.
But I'm
he
guessing
was unable to eat or drink, and
I'm assuming Yasuko didn't make it then. He couldn't go after Beck, so and Yasuko, as far as he could tell, was beyond saving, so he took the other two. Oh, that's sad.
and could barely move. His fellow climbers fully expected him to die within hours.
We saw an
and
old
made
picture
him
of
as
him.
comfortable as possible. They were startled when he lived through the night. The next day, they helped him walk down the mountain
homie
step
built
by
different.
agonizing step, until he was low enough to be evacuated by helicopter. He lost many of his fingers and his right arm to frostbite, along with most of his nose. But against all odds,
homie, a survivor.
Beck survived. He was, in many respects, lucky to do so. In
He was
total,
lucky.
8 climbers died on the slopes of Mount Everest during the blizzard. They were Adventure Consultant's Guide Andrew Harris, Adventure Consultant's Client Doug Hansen, Adventure Consultant's Group Leader Robert Hall, Adventure Consultant's Client Yasuko Namba, Mountain Madness Group Leader Scott Fisher, and 3 members of the Indo-Tibetan Border Police who had been attempting the summit in a separate expedition on the northern route up the mountain. Sewang Spandler, Naik Dorj Morap, and Sewang Paljo. This group had arrived at the summit very late in the day when the blizzard had already
R.I.P. to
started,
all of them.
and though sighted on the way down, could not be found by searchers. What is thought to be the body of Sewang Paljo remains in place on the trail up Everest. It is now a grisly landmark, recognizable by his distinctive green boots.
God, that's another thing. If a place uses bodies of dead hikers as landmarks, you probably want to be extremely sure that you're ready for that fucking climb.
That climbers pass on their way to the summit.
A fucking grisly
In
reminder.
the aftermath of the disaster, Mountain Madness guide Anatoly Bukriv was criticized for some of his actions in the lead-up to the disaster. Some expert climbers said that he should have stuck with his group at all times, and should have taken supplementary oxygen even if he believed he could manage without it. Even his critics, however, allowed that once the disaster had begun, he had acted with incredible courage.
Oh, he
and
had,
saved
definitely.
several lives. Something.
Could he have acted differently? Yeah, technically. But who's to say that if he did do that, he wouldn't have left early like he did to be ready to go out and be the search party for them? That's the issue with what ifs. You know, say he did take the oxygen with him. Maybe he would have hooked it up and stayed up there longer and gotten trapped with them. We don't know. Like, it's one of those crazy fucking things.
He might have been unable to do if he had not rested when he
Yeah,
did.
see, like I just said.
The expeditions were criticized for poor leadership, for bad decision-making, and for encouraging underprepared and underinformed climbers to tackle one of the most dangerous mountains in the world. It was notable that, despite this disaster representing one of the worst single losses of life in the history of Everest, the 1996 season as a whole saw fewer deaths than the average.
Damn,
Even
really?
at the very best of times, even without a mass disaster, the summit of Everest is a compelling but utterly deadly goal.
Emphasis on deadly, holy shit. God, I love Fascinating Horror. They're such a good channel. That was Fascinating Horror, the Mount Everest 1996 Disaster Part 2. So good. Make sure you guys check out the original. Like, comment, subscribe, and until next time, you guys take care of yourselves. See ya.